we should have a minimum of 35% of female representation at all governance levels. So in our last election, in fact, there was a policy to say, if you want to nominate your presidential candidate, your parliamentary or maybe local level representatives, out of every 3, there should be 1 female. Otherwise, the national electoral laws will not even accept your nomination. And because of that, we have been able to achieve a minimum of 35% female representation at all governance levels across the country. And then, of course, but then that goes with additional budget to the National Electoral Commission and all the other state functions. In our current parliament, 42 elected MPs out of 149 are female, and that is 28.4%, which is above the African average of 18.4%. Before that law came into existence, we were having 11% female representation at governance level. But then here are some red flags we need to pay attention to. While the budget was trying to address some of these economic issues and then the social issues, there are things perhaps most people will not think about. When the OBS survey report was out in 2023, Parliament was ranked 30 out of 100 in terms of budget oversight, and then the Audit Service alone was ranked 78 out of 100. So our national ranking dropped between 41 to 60. It means there are possibilities that most of the funds will not be effectively and efficiently used. So these are facts behind the figures you don't see, but they need to be paid, attention needs to be paid to them. Now, by end of 2022, our domestic debt was 34% of the total debt, and then we had our external debt 66%. And then the national budget constitutes and we know that those debts need to be financed, and you would see that most of the financing took a huge chunk of our resources. So that means if you are doing this development and you are also not paying attention to the repercussions, then there is a problem. Now, in 2006, we were part of the countries that had the debt burden waived by the EPIC program. But then as of 2020, our debt portfolio again increased to 30.3 billion. And then in June 2023, we had 63.5 billion, which means that figure doubled in 2 years. So what that means, if we were not taking more debt actually, but because we were not able to control interest rate, the repayment was actually coming $9 million or something. So that means we actually we took loan to do these development programs, but the repayment was actually quite worrisome for our economy. So these are some of the things we are now trying to address. Now, the new government came into power for this 2024. We have what they call the Big Five agenda, which is feed salon, human capital development, youth employment, and then revamping the public sector, technology, and infrastructure. So we are expecting the next budget to be focused on these things. So what is likely to happen again, we would map resources, and maybe 60% of the budget again will be contingent on loans, and then those loans are going to be refinanced. If we are not able to control interest rate, then there is possibility that we will also be depleting our revenue base and all of these challenges. So basically, these are some of the things. So in summary, what I would say is, the budget is a political and a political tool that is designed to address Africa's economic and social challenges. However, the objective could be counterproductive if proper management is not paid at all levels of our PFM circle. So in essence, I am saying, whilst we look at the economic and social challenges, we want to address them. If we are not able to increase our revenue generation, then we would have to know that it goes with consequences that we need to pay attention to. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jimisa, for that well-expounded presentation and for giving us an insight on the Sierra Leone experience. Delegates, the floor is now open. I'm going to be a little bit stingy with time. However, we are going to try and ensure that we get contributions or comments or questions which the panel can address. So maybe I can start from Gambia. Please keep it short to about 2 minutes, please. Thank you.
Thank you. This is going to be very short and precise. It's a question for Mr. Cooper. How does your budget address socio-economic development challenges? Okay. How does your budget address socio-economic development challenges?
Maybe we could take one more question, and just for our panelists, maybe an answer from all our experiences as far as those questions are concerned. Yes, that is Malawi.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to find out from the presenter and the panelists, how well are your parliaments involved in the planning process? Like PPO specifically, are you involved in maybe coming up with these pillars we're talking about? How well are you involved in the planning process? Because in our case, in Malawi, we have the National Planning Commission came up with the vision, the vision we're using right now, Malawi Vision 2063. But I think the challenge we've experienced in our case, like, is the vision actually, the pillars, are they speaking to the budget? Because we have the program-based budget, but they don't really speak to each other. Like, we're not able to pinpoint. For example, like, we're talking about mindset change. That's one of the pillar enabler in the vision. Can you actually pinpoint in the budget, like, okay, what's mindset change? Okay, how much is actually going towards mindset change and the likes? Of course, the commission comes back to the public basically with the progress implementation reports, and they can go like, yeah, 0.11% has actually gone to mindset change.
All right.
But for us to actually know what's in there, you know, so I'm trying to get a feel of how well you guys are also involved in this process.
Thank you. Yes. Then from Ghana.
Yes, I think maybe it's just a comment. The idea of linking the budget to the medium-term plan can be done using technology. In Ghana, what we have done is to quote all the national objectives and goals. So we have a budget planning system. We call it Hyperion. So the NDPC, after they finish with the national medium-term plan, they tease out the policy goals, objectives, and targets, and even strategies. So depending on the thematic area of a ministry, each ministry is working under a particular national goal and a national particular objective, and then the relevant strategies are predetermined and coded. So if you do your budget and you want to load it onto the gift miss, you use the Hyperion and they are linked. So if you do not, use technology to force ministry and department and allow them to decide what to cost into the budget, then I don't think you can effectively link the budget to the national plan. In Ghana, maybe the technology that we are using, maybe you can come and look at it and see how the budget is from the planning stage up to how it is loaded into the appropriation that comes to Parliament. And without selecting an objective or a strategy the country is going, you are definitely forced to link up. So I think that is a good idea.
Cooper to answer the question and the rest of the panelists, and then we shall pick on one other set of questions before moving on. Mr. Cooper, please.
Yes. Thank you for your question. In fact, it brings me back to thinking that I needed to explain more about the subject matter. What I did first was just to run you through our budgetary process in Liberia. But like I stated before I went through the budgetary process in Liberia, I said in Kenya, similar problems, social problems that they have, we in Liberia have similar problems. Like for instance, in my country, we had a civil war, and that civil war threw us back economically. And friends came to our aid. Take for instance Nigeria. Nigeria and other West African countries helped to stop our war. At the end of the war, the UN came in, they disarmed the soldiers, or the rebels as we used to call them. All of these people that were disarmed, right now, some of them are not going to school. They gave them money that they were able to buy motorbikes. They are running the motorbikes to earn their living. They got a few of them who go to the University of Liberia. So in our country, our budget, our national budget, we as a government have a serious problem, serious challenges, social problems that the budget from time to time we address. Like I said yesterday, I made mention of climate change. What the government for the FY 2024 budget, what they did for the commission that was established to cater to people who will be victimized by climate change. The National Disaster Commission, I said they submitted a draft budget of 738,000, but the legislature in its wisdom carried that figure to $2.6 million, so that a flood somewhere in our country, it rains a lot. If flood is somewhere that will displace people, that money will help to take care of them. And education, also the budget addresses education in our country. Take for instance the University of Liberia. When he came in agenda, which is called arrest. Arrest simply means agriculture, roads, education, sanitation, and tourism. For us to make more money, we have beautiful beaches in Liberia. So the president believes that if we can capitalize on the resources that we have, like the beaches, the beautiful beaches that we have, if we can make them to be attractive to tourists, we're going to be able to raise more money for our budget. As I said earlier, our budget is supported through taxes, non-tax revenue, and so forth. And the non-tax revenue, the SOEs, the state-owned enterprises, the contributions that they make to the budget come on non-tax revenue. So the money that raised from, let's say, is raised from taxes and non-tax revenue is not enough. We borrow, like for the budget for 2024, as I said here, we have like $40 million that is there as borrowing. So we try to reduce from being heavily indebted to the IMF or the World Bank to making our own money, like I said when I made a presentation for mobilizing resources, domestic resources.
Thank you,
So
Mr.
again,
Cooper.
we on the right track.
All right, thank you very much. Over to Mr. Odiambo. And Mr. Odiambo, you are free to answer that and the other comments and questions that we put forward.
Thank you very much, delegates, for listening to us. I think I would want to respond to the question by Malawi Sangwani. To what extent are our parliaments involved in this planning process? Yes, I think the Parliament of Kenya approves these plans. For example, the long-term plan, the Vision 2030, was approved by Parliament through what was called a sessional paper. So normally, it was a sessional paper that approved it. Now, the medium-term plans are not approved by Parliament, but we approve the budget policy statement, which basically more of the annual plan for the national governments. We've got also the sub-nationals here, in Kenya, and they're represented here. their legislatures also approve the 5-term plans, which they call them the county integrated development plans. They also approve the annual plans, which again are remitted to the assemblies, and they're approved by making amendments or otherwise. I think Ghana had a comment, and he just mentioned that we can use technology to do these things, and he mentioned Hyperion. I think in Kenya we also have the Hyperion system, but I wanted to put a question that technology can be there, but it may not be helpful. Particularly, there's a saying that garbage in, garbage out. So in Kenya, there's the program-based budget, which is also linked to Hyperion. So if what is fed into the system is garbage, then expect garbage to be the one coming out. So you have to be very careful. But I agree with you, we can use technology to do that. I've got a question here to comment about budgeted corruption. I hear this word a lot in Kenya. In Kenya, they say about a third of the budget is wasted. Therefore, those are some of the things they call budgeted corruption. But I think we have to decide as a country where we want to move to. That's why some countries perhaps invest heavily on issues of governance so that they strengthen oversight institutions so that these corruption cases are minimized. You remember the difference between Africa and Singapore, somebody said, is the level of corruption. Singapore decided to do away with the corruption.
Should pay critical attention to budget oversight. For me, that is very key. Like I was explaining, for example, in our case, 13.7 billion was the Appropriation Act for Sierra Leone 2023. If you look at it, you see our total appropriated figure was 13.7 billion. Of that, 28.2% that was focused on debt servicing. And then you have 35% on salaries and wages. So that tells you, and the entire budget, you look at 60% being generated from external sources. So that tells you, if your revenue generation pattern is not increasing, then it means you are taking loans, you're not putting them on productive activities. And if also external surveys are telling you that you're not doing much on oversight, then it means there is high probability that efficiency and effectiveness will not be achieved from the budget. So in as much as you want to map your resources or whatever revenue to development programs, but there is need to pay attention to oversight, there is need to pay attention to your external debt and all of those other things. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jimisa, for your comments. There was one burning question from behind. Maybe I will accept that one question. Please keep it short, preferably 1 minute. And then there was one additional question, and then we shall proceed. Ladies and gentlemen, please be advised that you could also write down your questions, and they can be forwarded to the panel for a quick response. Yes, please. You're welcome.
Thank you for the opportunity. I will not be long. It's Miataza from the Eastern Cape in South Africa. I think maybe it's just to learn more from what Mr. Odiambo said. It's an area of concern for us because he did mention that he highlighted it as a challenge when he said the areas are a challenge that is with their budget process. Now, I assume then, I hope correctly, that what he was referring to were the accruals and the payables.
Could you speak a little bit closer to the microphone?
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, that's better.
Oh, okay. No, he mentioned that is the areas being a challenge that is in the budget. Now, what I want to check, I just want to understand that maybe I understood correct. That is what he meant by those areas were actually, that is the accruals and the payables. that are there, that is at the end of the financial year. The reason I'm raising this is an area of concern that is to us, that is in the province. Because, for example, last week we have just passed the budget for 24-25. In that budget, at the end, that is 31 March 2023, there were payables of about 4.4 billion rands, which is about 5% of the budget that was passed that year. And then 31 March 2024, those accruals, only 68%, those payables, only 68% of those were paid. Now we've just passed another budget of which we do not know what the payables are for 31 March 2024. Now that affects the credibility of the budget we have just passed. But he did say that there is a law in their country which sort of expects that those be a direct charge, that is from the budget. Much as it affects, that is the credibility of the budget. The other part is that is money that is due to the suppliers and mostly the SMMEs who are touted to be the drivers of economic growth. If I can learn more, that is, or hear more regarding that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Diambo, maybe you've taken note. Yes, the gentleman behind. Please make it short.
Mine is just a question which I need clarification on, especially on the African concept. And I may like to know what are the strategies can African nation use to increase government revenue sustainability without over relying on external debt or revenue extraction? That's just a question which I have. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. I think I'll allow Mr. Diambo to take that question, and then maybe the second one, and then we can go through the panel.
Okay, thank you very much. I think the question relates to arrears. I said that, yes, arrears affects the implementation of the budget of the subsequent years. Now, in Kenya, the way the law is, we make commitments not on the basis of cash, but on the basis of budget. You know, I also mentioned another term there called sequencing of appropriation, which basically was the cash budgeting. But in Kenya, we make commitments on the basis of the budget. Now, once you've made commitments and perhaps due to one reason or the other, the financial year has lapsed because of a dip in revenue performance, some bills for one way or the other could not be paid. These bills are supposed to be taken to the next fiscal year, and they're supposed to form the first charge. However, not all, in our case, not all bills will form the first charge because of governance issues. So sometimes those bills, some of them may not necessarily be genuine. So there's a fiscal risk paying bills which are not genuine. Therefore, most of the times, the government will isolate the genuine. The ones, and perhaps they form the first charge. The ones which are, now, the ones which are not straightforward, normally the National Treasury forms a committee to look at them further. So in that process then, we say they affect the implementation of the budget in the sense that within the plan, which are three-year plan, perhaps they were not factored in. Therefore, you have to bring them on board. And therefore, they have to compete with then other expenditures. Thank you.
And then there was a question from the gentleman at the back concerning alternative sources of funding outside of the major international creditors, if that is what you meant. Maybe Mr. Jimisa, if you have any comment on that?
All right, okay. I think he was asking, how do we ensure that we increase domestic revenue so that we don't focus much on debts, because I was very much concerned about that. So for me, in my view, one of the ways we should actually help in supporting domestic revenue generation, or perhaps not being over-dependent on loans, external debt, firstly is to be able to manage our interest rate movement as a state. Because once you do that, what happens for the most part, you see your debt burden increasing. In reality, you are actually not taking loans because of interest rate disparity over time. So if you're able to manage the real sector in that respect, then there is possibility that your debt burden will not be skyrocketing. Secondly, I think oversight needs to be improved so that when you take these loans, you want to put them on development activities or infrastructural activities, for instance, you are able to grow the economy generally, because the idea of actually taking loans is to be able to inject into the economy so that you can stimulate economic activities. Then in the long run, you are able to generate more revenue. So, but if the debt is increasing and domestic revenue is not increasing, the economic variables are not responding, that means perhaps you need to do oversight to be able to improve that. And then thirdly, perhaps another thing you could do is, governments operate on, the budget is a component of revenue and expenditure. If your revenue streams are not growing, then the only way you can manage is to contain expenditure. See where you can cut expenditure so that you don't necessarily need to take unnecessary loans that would have to give you so much repayment challenges. So maybe these are some of the interventions developing countries could pay attention to, among many other stuff. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Mr. Cooper.
Yes. From the Liberian perspective, as per the presentation I made regarding domestic revenue mobilization, the panelist, Dr. Masindi, in a nutshell, said the only way, one of the main way we can reduce let's say we can increase domestic revenue is to reduce tax expenditure. That is giving exemption to people because maybe they want to come and invest in your country. You give them investment incentive that will be exorbitant. It will help to reduce the ability for you to raise revenue. Even the lawmakers, I don't know whether in Uganda they are giving duty-free privileges and so forth for things that they input. If we reduce duty-free privileges to people, it will help us to raise money that will in turn help us to reduce borrowing from lenders, be it domestic lender or foreign lender. That's one of the ways I feel that we can go about reducing debt burden and raising more money.
Jimisa, Director, Parliamentary Budget Office, Sierra Leone, and Mr., not yet Doctor, but Mr. Moses T. Cooper, Director, Liberia Budget Office. Thank you very much. You can proceed back to the floor. With that said, we are going to be going into our second topic for the thematic area this morning, which, just for memory purposes, is budget approval and oversight for inclusive and sustainable development. And our topic will be scrutinizing and costing of policy measures of the budget, key areas to consider. Now, delegates, this session will explore how Parliament budget officers could assess the allocative efficiency of a government's stated priorities against its spending commitments. So priorities on one side and spending commitments on the other. And to kick us off, I would like to welcome our presenter, Mr. Othello S. Tabar, who is the Deputy Director for Expenditure at the Liberia Budget Office. He will come and give his presentation, and thereafter we shall quickly move into our panel, where we shall have a variety of panelists who shall take us through what Mr. Othello and any other questions that may arise will have gone through. Mr. Othello, you're most welcome. And for purposes of clarity, you have 10 minutes, Mr. Othello.
Okay. So the RT. Yeah. Thank you very much. Technical problem is looming. Same problem the speaker that preceded me had, but I think we're overcoming it. As the moderator has indicated, we'll be presenting on scrutinizing and costing of policy measures of the budget, and that we will be considering key areas. We have 10 minutes. We'll do our best to remain within the time limit, and so that we can all be on time as we conclude these deliberations. We look at the outline. Quickly, we're talking about costing. Reduction versus cost control. Cost control, why policymakers are concerned about cost management in any project. And costing, we want to look at it within the context of activities that are undertaken. Then we'll review some key areas. Costing, everything that we've been saying here since the inception of this conference, anchored on in the context of the medium-term expenditure framework, emphasis on national development agenda of any country. So costing has to do with the resources that are given up for a particular project, and the amount of expenditure that is actually incurred. Expenditure in this case, we're talking about actual against projection. Then costing, we're looking at costing in another context, within the context of opportunity cost, the cost that has been foregone. Costing is very, very important, and the objective of costing is to what? Critical input of pricing of goods and services. We talk about valuation of stock, and we talk about costing in measuring efficiency. That is the reason why costing is important if we are pursuing policy measures. Classification of cost. They are all listed there, talking about time, nature of element, traceability, change in activity, blah, 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 and stuff like that. Let's look at cost reduction versus cost control. In this case, we are talking about you have to spending entities most time will try to inflate costs for whatever reason. So if you are giving your ceilings, you have to remain within Let's dissect cost control versus cost reduction. Cost reduction, we are talking about improving profitability or talking about service delivery. Cost control, talking about meeting the expected level of outcome, which the details are listed there. There are prerequisites for cost control. In this case, you have to be specific. You have to avoid generality, mention and discuss specific issues, and you have to allow openness and free flow of communication without pride and prestige. Status attached to organizational levels are not considered. Creative thinking is rewarded and encourage people accept change as part of the overall development process. There is a good data bank, especially relating to cost, so that it can be a reference point, and people constantly search for better ways of performing their job.